And product stewardship is producer responsibility. So the brands that are putting the product on the market need to be responsible for that item across its entire life cycle, not just from the point of sale.
Hello and welcome. I'm Elizabeth Formosa, the founder of Fashion Equipped and devourer of all things fashion, business and mindset. In this podcast, I'm speaking with thought leaders, change makers and entrepreneurs about the business side of fashion and everything in between. Fashion Business Mindset is your front row seat to real stories from designers, brands, entrepreneurs, makers and mentors. We'll discuss how to launch and grow a fashion business and give you insider access to the future of fashion. So let's do this together and ensure that you're equipped to make the fashion business your business. Welcome back to Fashion Business Mindset. My guest today is Danielle Kent, the Project Director for Seamless. Seamless is a product stewardship scheme that aims to transform how clothing is made, used, reused and recycled in Australia to create clothing circularity by 2030. Danielle has been lead on the design and development of Seamless for the past 2 years with a consortium of organisations and the Australian Fashion Council. Danielle has been lead on the design and development of Seamless for the past 2 years with a consortium of organisations and the Australian Fashion Council. She has extensive experience in strategy and complex change management as a consultant and a full range of government experience. Danielle has a postgraduate in social impact and helped establish the not-for-profit company Impact Investing Australia, reporting to the G8 International Social Taskforce on impact investing. She fully appreciates the discipline and challenges of system transformation and is passionate about the Seamless vision. During this dynamic conversation, we dived into the Seamless scheme framework, including circularity and citizenship, what Seamless product stewardship is setting out to achieve, why the fashion industry must take action, how brands and businesses can get involved, and what to expect next. I enjoyed every minute of learning more about Seamless and the transformational work that Danielle, the entire team at Seamless, and our industry are embarking on. So let's dive in. Danielle, welcome to the Fashion Business Mindset podcast.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here.
Now, Danielle, to set the scene, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and share some insights into your role as Seamless Project Director at the Australian Fashion Council?
Yes, sure. So as Project Director, really for the last 2 years, I've been in the most privileged position, to be working with this amazing and brilliant group of experts and leaders in Australia as part of the project consortium. So I really have been on this concentrated learning curve, shall we say, when it comes to clothing circularity and product stewardship. So I've just been an observer of some amazing people over the last 2 years. I've sat in so many workshops and meetings, consultations with recyclers, reuse, all talking about the issue of textile waste, brands especially. So I feel like I've got a really moderated and balanced understanding now of what the issues and challenges are when it comes to solving for the textile waste issue in Australia. So that's my role at the moment. Previous to this role, I've been working in different roles across the industry that look at strategic change and change management and complex environments. So I do have that as kind of a background set of skills, which I think has really lended itself to this role. I've also worked in state and federal government roles, so appreciate and I suppose understand the purpose of policy and how that can achieve some really good outcomes at a social and environmental level. So bringing all of those elements together, I kind of feel like I'm really suited for the challenge ahead as we keep going with Seamless. I've always been really interested in purpose-led organisations. So I suppose that's helped me settle into the not-for-profit sector. And look, to be honest, I've never felt so connected to my work in the work that I've been doing lately, and really feeling like when you're working on issues that can really affect change, it just kind of rounds you out as a person and makes you feel, I stopped thinking about, oh, what's next, or is this the right job? I know I'm exactly where I need to be. So it's kind of like a real perfect moment for me at the moment.
Well, congratulations. How exciting. What a perfect place to be professionally. It sounds like it's been quite the immersion, Danielle, quite the masterclass, and setting you up well for what's to come in the coming months and years. So
Yes.
let's talk about seamless. It's the hot topic in the fashion industry at the moment. So
Yes.
Seamless aims to create a circular clothing industry by 2030, where responsible stewardship and citizenship are embedded across the entire clothing life cycle.
That's
So
right.
can you step us through the key pillars of Seamless?
Yeah. And I might just go back one step, like, why do we even need it? Like, there's so much good stuff happening in our industry, and that's not that's not to be kind of overlooked. But what we know is the problem is too big. So we sort of set out with the problem with, what are we trying to solve for here? We know that Australians buy, 56 items, and that number is only rocketing upwards per year. The consumption rates are growing, and Australia is one of the highest. That level of consumption is unsustainable for the planet. So that's
How
kind of our
often?
base.
How often are they buying the 56 items?
A year, and that's going up to 60.
Wow.
Now, I talk to some people and they're like, oh, that can't be right. I only buy 5 things. But they're sort of balancing out the people that are nudging up towards 100 items. So it's mind-blowing. Yeah.
Yeah.
What we do know also is that Australia has a thriving reuse sector. Like, Aussies love and know how to donate. We're very good at understanding what we do with those clothes that can be donated. We take it down to, it's a very systemic kind of approach in Australia with all the charity shops. But we are seeing a lot of unwearables come through those charity shops, and that costs charities millions of dollars a year in sorting and landfill fees. So charities are currently bearing the costs of this kind of problem. And then we also know that there's absolutely no systematic collection of unwearable clothing. So Australians relate to this problem really quickly when you sort of say, what do you do with that T-shirt? It's not going to go to St. Vincent's de Paul's. Where's it going? It goes in the bin, it goes in your red bin. And you feel guilty when you do it, but there's actually no other, collection system at scale for us to sort of engage with. So these are the kind of problem areas across the supply chain, and that seeing 56 items and all of these issues, we're seeing about 200,000 tons of clothing going into Australian landfill every year. So really, this linear model that the fashion and clothing industry has around take, make, dispose requires systemic and transformative change if we're going to start to think about it in a circular way. And like I said at the start, individual brands, they're not making any significant difference, and we need that collective power. So that's the problem statement, I suppose, when we think about, well, why do we even need Seamless? So what is it? So it's a product stewardship scheme, which might be familiar language to some people, but for others, they've just never heard of what those words even mean. So all a scheme is a coordinated plan. So thinking about, and product stewardship is producer responsibility. So the brands that are putting the product on the market need to be responsible for that item across its entire life cycle, not just from the point of sale. It's how does it end, where does it end up, where does it go, and what's the responsibility of brands right from the start in the way that they put that product on the market, design it, sell it, all of those sorts of things. So that's what a product stewardship scheme is. We see batteries and paint and mobile phones. There's so many that already exist in our life. We're very familiar with product stewardship schemes. But with clothing, it really lends itself to circularity because it's bigger. It's more than a battery. It's more than a plastic bottle. It has culture and identity and psychology and, celebration and beauty. There's so much about clothing that really creates a story around a product. And I don't know whether you necessarily get that with a mattress or a battery. So I think there's something unique happening here where everyone's really engaged in wanting to be part of this whole concept. So I'm really inspired by that. But when you think about the key parameters that Seamless sets out, so it will cover all new clothing coming into the market, so that's imported into or manufactured in Australia. So every new piece of clothing being put on the Australian market, whether sold or unsold. So the whole thing will be funded by a financial contribution paid by the brand owners. So we call them stewards. And that's on each new item of clothing that they place on the market. And presently, this is recommended at 4 cents per item. And then Seamless looks to address those market failures that are currently preventing that shift to the circular economy. So putting all the resources into the areas of the supply chain that don't exist or need to scale immeasurably or just aren't working. So it's not setting out to duplicate or replicate existing services. It's about bringing it together and really amplifying it into a more coordinated effort, because every organization that's working in this are going to hit a natural limit at some point where it's like, now we need to take it to that next level of policy and investment and systemic change that brings this whole thing together. So it's got a big ambition, Seamless, but it's all everything's in place to make it happen. So that's how we think about what it is.
Yeah.
Now, I might just dive down, while I'm sort of on this rant around what it is. There are 4 central activities that we think about when we talk about Seamless. The first one is around circular design. So really looking at the point where brands can make an impact on a garment's life cycle. So designing out waste right from the start, that's just as important as end-of-life processing. So the intention is that Seamless would work with its members to develop and implement circular design guidelines at that industry standard. That's one of the sort of things that we see around circular design. And that's a really important part of it, because it really does kind of dictate how that product will be sort of kept at its highest use for as long as possible. So the more durable and the higher quality right from the start will lend itself to being in your wardrobe for longer, being able to swap or rent or repair, like taking into consideration all those other options as the piece of clothing does sort of head down that hierarchy. Second one is circular business models. So we're seeing a little bit of this popping up, and people will have, started to notice new rental business options and resale platforms. And sometimes when you go on, say, the Iconic, you go to buy something and it tells you straight away like what you can resale that for, or like this is really fantastic that we're starting to build this in. But we need to normalize this to the point where it's not like a moment of curiosity, or I think consumers are like, oh, I'm interested, but it's not accessible, or you just don't feel like, is everyone else doing this? Like, is this what we're doing now? So we need to get more and more of these business models into the market so that it is completely normalized that clothing does, move around in a network, as opposed to kind of, sitting in a wardrobe and then heading straight into like a charity bin.
Yeah.
The third part of Seamless, which is really critical, is this closing the loop, and a significant amount of the funding will head into this area, and that requires large change in the collection of unwearable clothes, which, like I said, does not exist in Australia at a national scale at this point. We also need to look at, conducting research and introducing technology to achieve that new textile recycling industry and economy in Australia. Now, it's really timely. Just this week, Renewcell announced its bankruptcy, and going forward is to sort of see what is working, what hasn't worked, and what are the lessons to be learnt. I think there is a lot of lessons to be learned around the Renewcell experience, and it's not over. We've been in conversations with Renewcell. I know exactly from talking to them where their challenges were, and that kind of conversation helps us to think about, when we're planning forward into the Australian recycling market, what are the things we need to do? And that's really securing those end markets for recycled content. And then finally, citizen behaviour change. Arguably, the most important is about, resourcing and funding a nationwide education campaign for citizens to buy better, care for your clothes, and that informed kind of end of life disposal. What do you do? We've really purposefully talked about citizens as opposed to consumers, because this isn't just about the point of consumption. This is about thinking about clothing from a citizen perspective. So throughout the entire life, and even before the clothes is purchased, like that thinking process and that thoughtful consumption that you go through, like, do I need this? How many times will I wear it? Have I already got something like this? Just sort of testing yourself around whether or not you really need it, and whether there's other options available to you, like a swapping or a renting. Like, does this need to come new into my wardrobe, or is there other things? So building up that kind of citizen behaviour is another key piece of Seamless.
Yeah. What a robust framework, Danielle. It sounds like you've covered all bases, from the circularity side of things, closing the loop, citizen behaviour. There's so many exciting, I guess, areas of focus to dive into. Just before we do move on, it would be great just to clarify RenewCell for our audience. So perhaps could you just touch on who they are and what happened, just to put that into context for our audience?
Yeah, sure. So RenewCell is, to my understanding, the only at-scale fibre-to-fibre recycling facility in the world. It was based in Stockholm, and it was using post-consumer product at scale and developing an end-of-product fibre, cellulosic fibre that could be used back into new garments. And so, which is wonderful. Like, it's so great that we've got the technology. We are in a discovery, like we are in a world of discovery when it comes to all of this stuff. And it's so interesting how people respond to these moments of failure, because it's not a fail. Nothing is a fail. It's a learn. And we're all going to be in that position, and we need to have that kind of growth mindset that, okay, well, it doesn't mean that, doom and gloom, why are we even trying? Of course, it's like about building on top of all the good work that's gone before. I really believe that.
Yeah, I agree too. I think in any area of innovation, you're going to have your successes and your failures, but that's what it's all about when you are breaking new ground. So yeah, I know there's been an uproar about RenewCell going into bankruptcy, but as you said, it's not a failure, it's a learning, it's a massive learning. And I guess, from an industry perspective, we need to really look at that, learn from it. And then there's going to be kind of that reset into, okay, well, what happens next? What's relevant for now, and what's relevant for the future?
Yep. And the same goes with RedCycle. Like, I know we get asked a lot of questions about the RedCycle experience. That was a massive learning. Again, it's about securing end markets. That's, so for us, that's a no-brainer. Like, it has to be built into the blueprint, and what we're trying to achieve by 2030 is those end markets, securing them, but also giving enough runway to really get into the cadence and the ordering sort of cycle of these brands, so that you aren't left with this massive kind of gap of cash flow because you've got the product but you haven't been able to allow enough time to build it into the runway required by the brands. That's, as I understand it, kind of what RenewCell faced.
Yeah, understand. Definitely one for our audience to look into. Again, just as I said, the key learnings that can be taken away. So robust strategy, great framework of those, 4 key pillars. Let's talk about the founding members of Seamless. Like, who is leading the way, and how far down the track are we?
Yes. So when we sort of set out to activate, Seamless, it wasn't going to be a report on the shelf, another report on the shelf. Like, and the minister made it clear that her expectation was to have a shovel-ready scheme. So we kind of interpreted that as we needed to. But we had to sort of bootstrap this. Like, the industry had to fund, like the government funding finished, and it was up to industry to start to sort of invest and fund that next level of transition and establishment. So we did approach the top 30 brands in Australia. This is a volume game. So we know that around 60 to 70% of the clothing volume in the Australian market only comes from about 10 or 15 actual brands. So we know it's a captured market. We know who we need to talk to, and that's who we're talking to. So we reached out to the top 30 brands and invited them all to come in as foundation members. Putting $100,000 up front, which would become a rebated to them in the first year of operations. and we were able to secure 6 brands, and that was Big W, David Jones, Lorna Jane, Rip Curl, R.M. Williams, and The Iconic. So at the launch last June, that's the 6 brands that kind of, stood up, and like these brands are iconic Australian leaders. Like we
Yeah.
all know these brands. So that was so good. And there's a real depth and breadth in these brands as far as their profile. Like one's an online retailer, one's R.M. Williams, who's like the DNA of Australia,
Yeah.
and David Jones, and you've got Big W, big enterprise. There was not one brand that wasn't sort of it's not like it was just all one type. We've got a real range and depth, which is great because that's exactly what we need in terms of the voices at the table.
Yeah.
And then we had Cotton On Group come on, as well as the Suzanne Group. So it's got Sports Girl and Suzanne Group in there. So that kind of spoke to these 2, again, massive brands in Australia, sort of saying we need to be in on this. So, these brands, they're going to start to get this first mover advantage very soon if they haven't already. They are actively involved in the establishment of Seamless. So every foundation member has a position on the board, the Seamless board, and they'll be setting the strategic direction of the new organisation in the next, month. And what an ideal position to be in as a brand, to be really, having your voice heard around what are the priorities of our industry. It makes this scheme very industry owned and industry led. So that puts it in a really good position to be durable and long term, as opposed to, immediate or sort of thinking about just near term objectives. Like these brands will really want to see the success of Seamless for their own success.
Yeah.
So we also got $100,000, I need to call out, from the New South Wales EPA.
Yeah.
So that was great because that kind of really sort of saw that commitment at the state government level. So Seamless really is in line with the circularity objectives of government too. So they were the foundation members, and EPA put us on our path for the first year.
Well, look, congratulations. Shout out to the foundation members. I mean, it is a big commitment, but as you said, it's a seat at the table and no better place to be in terms of the future of the fashion industry. I will ask the question, no doubt, that our listeners will be thinking about at this point in time. You approached 30 brands, okay, and we've got 6 brands and retailers that have given their commitment to Seamless. What happened with the other businesses that you approached? What was their response, and what has held those people, those businesses back from getting involved to date?
Look, I would say without sort of really understanding the ins and outs of other businesses, and they're the best to comment, but what I can say about the brands that signed on is that at the top level, at that senior CEO level, you had their heart and mind. You've captured their heart and mind. So once you've sort of infiltrated the board level and at the C-suite, once they're on board and aligned with the vision, it's just green light the whole way. So I suppose I can't talk to why brands didn't join confidently, but I can talk to the brands that have joined. It's been because it's been at that CEO level or the C-suite level or the board level where it's been like, this is what we want to be a part of. This is the future of our business and our industry. So having that vision at the senior level just enables smooth sailing from there on in. So I think that that's kind of been the key to the success of the brands that have signed on. Yeah, so I suppose, like I said, I can't talk to the brands that haven't, but we are still in conversation with a lot of brands and completely understand if some brands are thinking, I just need a bit more information. Who was the CEO? Like back in June, we didn't even know who the board was going to be, who the CEO was going to be. So, these brands put a lot of confidence in what we've been doing the last few months. Now, as we move forward, there's a lot more clarity around some of those unknowns. And I'd like to think that will settle some of those concerns around, okay, here's the board, the constitution, the CEO. These are the founding principles in place to set up a long-term durable organisation. The strategic plan will be the next step. So once we kind of come out with the strategic plan, again, that will settle hopefully in the hearts and minds of boards and senior executives around what Seamless is, and then they'll come on board.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point for our audience and for the industry, Danielle, that Seamless it's in development. So, of course, it's a significant amount of money that you're requiring the businesses to put in to be a founding member. And of course, they want to know what the strategic pathway is going to be. And it's not a decision that you make lightly. So it makes complete sense. But we hope to see those numbers growing in terms of the businesses that get involved. So founding members, big contribution to help with the funding initially. And then you talked about the 4 cents per item. So let's get into that.
Yep.
What is the plan around the implementation of that? What is the process? What needs to happen? And at what point in time do you think that decision will be made?
Yeah, so the 4 cents is currently recommended, so it's at a recommendation state. So the consortium recommended 4 cents, and it's really important to note that we didn't start with the 4 cents. We started with the objectives of the scheme. So what are we trying to achieve? What was Seamless's kind of purpose and intention? And that came back to what I said at the start around joined up thinking, joined up funding to get that collective impact to really transform an industry and get to a circular economy by 2030. So once we started to shape those long-term goals, objectives, and ambitions and vision for what that looks like, then we brought it back down to the market. So we brought in an economist who looked at market share, volume of clothing. We modeled lots of different scenarios around volume-based levies. We looked internationally at a lot of sort of similar type levies internationally, but then we contextualize that against the Australian context. We have a lot of geography to deal with, supply, logistics, etc. And so that was when we came up with the 4 cents, and we consulted heavily throughout the project, obviously, with industry. So we feel like that recommendation is very robust, and that's now with the Seamless board to further interrogate and put an approval around. So part of that will be looking at the eco-modulation piece as well, which basically is a reduced levy that will incentivize good behaviour. So if a brand is already producing product that has a high level of recycled content, then it'll go from 4 cents down to 3 cents. So that not only rewards brands for doing good things, but also incentivizes brands to do good things. So that's been part of the proposed model. And I think that's really elegant, to be honest, that 4 cent, 3 cent. So what that means is if we can get 4 cents per garment and we can get 60% of the volume, like we said, which is we've made some moderate assumptions over the next 2 years, we're looking at approximately $36 million a year for our annual budget to fund and invest in something that no organisation will ever have the budget to really put into to change an industry. So I think when you start to look at it in that cumulative effect, it's like the only way we are going to solve for this humongous problem is to really start to be smart about our joined up thinking and joined up funding and finding that shared solution. So that's kind of how we put it together. So how that rolls out, the intention is 1 July. That was always the intention of when the scheme would start. I'm not going to make any sort of grand statements today about exactly when the 4 cents will be and how that will roll out. But that is the work of the board in the next little while. And we're only mere weeks away before we can start to communicate some of that out to the market so they can be more confirmed or understanding of what it's going to mean for their business model.
Yeah. So once the board signs it off, so once they've looked at it, they've dived, any deeper they need to around the 3 cents, 4 cents, the good behaviour, the whole structure, is this going to be mandatory? Like what's the next step? How does the industry then respond and start paying this levy?
Well, it's a voluntary scheme. So obviously nothing's mandatory. Seamless is a voluntary scheme. So you would basically sign up as a member. The intention is that you would sign up as a member. You would declare the units that you've sold across, the previous year, and then you would be invoiced quarterly against those units at 4 cents a garment. So there's a whole heap of work, though, that needs to be done around small to medium businesses. The intention is this is administratively light. So we need to do some work with our members and all the members coming in to understand how to almost leverage or make sure that that is not an administrative burden. The reporting is light. There'll be an auditing system. Like, we need to, phase this sort of stuff in. So there's a lot of operational execution that needs to occur. But that was the intention the consortium set out, was that you would be based on the previous year's units invoiced quarterly. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. That was sort of back, 12 or so months ago.
Yeah.
We really need to work with our members now to test that against their own and understand the impact of that against their operations.
I'm really glad that you've clarified that, because I think in the ether at the moment, I think there's this threat of mandatory fees that people are feeling a little bit vulnerable about, thinking, okay, well, where are we going? So at the moment, voluntary scheme, everyone, just to let you know. And of course, we want as many brands and businesses involved as possible. As you said, $36 million, what a game changer that would be to our industry. I mean, yes, that would just be an outstanding result. But realistically, it would be good for you to share, Danielle, what the Minister shared in regards to giving the industry an opportunity to turn this around and turn this around swiftly. And if we don't, what's the potential outcome of not doing anything?
Yeah. So look, I would never assume to know what the Minister will or won't say. Obviously, last week she came out and said exactly what she said in June. There was nothing new last week in her statements. So, but for some people that might have been the first time they've heard it. And for some people it might be just a reminder, this message isn't going away. This wasn't a one-off message in June 2023, and we never hear from the Minister again. She is committed to seeing change in our industry. But I think that, the best case scenario for brands, I'll talk about the worst case in a minute, but I prefer to start with the best case. The best case scenario for brands is to come on board during this voluntary stage, come on board to Seamless and really shape and influence the elements of the scheme to self-determine, like a fit-for-purpose solution for our industry. So being in the driver's seat where industry can own it and lead it will be far more effective and durable and meaningful to all of us. I don't think any industry wants to be regulated. A regulated scheme will be punitive, enforced, like a highly administrative burden to the entire industry. And I expect it won't sit anywhere near around 4 cents a garment. It'd be, up to 10 times more than that. So why would we not take this opportunity and see what we can do in this voluntary environment with Seamless? We are in dialogue with the federal government around the progress of Seamless. So I know that the Minister is really keen to see some action and some membership by 1 July. So obviously working with the Minister and also, coming to an agreed understanding of what success actually looks like at 1 July for industry. I think the best case scenario for us is to have another 12 months, like to launch Seamless, get in as many members as possible and really prove ourselves in this voluntary environment for another 12 months. I think it would be a bit of a shame. We've done so much work, and to kind of get to July and not have that opportunity to just prove ourselves in the voluntary model with how we've intended it to be. That's my own personal kind of, that would be ideal.
Yes.
But I don't, which isn't to say there isn't a place for regulation in the future. So we know that internationally we're seeing regulation appear in countries that have been doing this for a lot longer for us. And it's about sort of sweeping up those brands at the end that are never going to be part of something. But we're not there yet. We're still at the start where there is a good level of commitment and momentum from a number of brands. They just need a little bit more time to settle into the idea of being part of the Seamless sort of model.
Yeah.
So I feel like we just need a little bit more time on our side. But as an industry, I wouldn't wait for regulation. Let's not wait. Like, don't sit around waiting to be regulated, because we're going to delay the inevitable. And we all know the problem. It's right in front of our eyes right now. And I think the work that's happened in the last 2 years gives us a plan and an action. Like, there's enough good work there to get going straight away. So why wouldn't we? There's no reason why we wouldn't start.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Can we just touch a little bit more before moving on into how brands can get involved and businesses can get involved? In regards to regulation, Are you aware of any regulations in other countries that you could reference? So, perhaps what we really need to be aware of, what are others facing that could potentially be coming down the pipeline at us if we don't make a change voluntarily?
Well, look, in the textile industry, to be honest, I think that, Australia, we were a bit of a laggard in this space a couple of years ago. There's so much happening across the world. But because of, our sort of sit back and see what's happening, and we took the best bits and we designed seamless, I think we've leapfrogged, dare I say, a little bit, to the front now. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely getting international interest. Ellen MacArthur, different organizations that are like, wow, that's really loving this model. And so in terms of textile, I don't think I don't think there's another example that I could give you, but more locally, thinking about cans have been regulated, and that's a 10-cent kind of deposit on cans, whereas
Yeah.
a piece of clothing would be far more. So I think just thinking about the cost, like that's really what should be motivating brands, is to
Yeah.
be not wanting to move into a space where you're paying 40 cents an item. Cost of living is certainly not what we want to be seeing, whereas 4 cents is far more consumable. And when you think about 4 cents per person, if it's 56 items, it's $2.50 a
Yeah.
year. Annually, you're asking people to pay $2.50 a year to really come up with, a proper solution to what is a very real problem.
Yeah. It's less than a cup of coffee, right?
Right. The other thing to say about the 4 cents, which is really important, is that we don't mandate that brands, seamless brands, pass that on to the consumer. So it's not a tax as such. So, but brands can do that if they choose.
Yeah.
But the intention of seamless is that the circularity and the kind of the real focus there is on about designing out waste and creating efficiency as a holistic kind of business means that there is an opportunity to absorb that 4 cents into your business model without having to pass it on to the consumer. But for some brands, they might want to pass it on to the consumer because that's a really strong message as well. 4
Yes.
cents for this is paying towards. So we haven't dictated that. And I think that's really important for brands to sort of say, well, the consumer can't pay 4 cents. So I would put that onus back onto the brands. Like, will you save it in your business model? Like you work hard and get that efficiency and be leaner in your ordering and smarter, in those sorts of processes, so that you are saving the 4 cents and not putting it onto the customer.
Yeah. Yeah. From a citizen or consumer perspective, do you have any data or information that you can share with our audience around sentiment when it comes to this topic?
Yeah, so no, I don't. Not from an Australian perspective. There's not a lot of data that's been created. And really, one of the first things we need to do is create a baseline across all of the 4 things. Like, where are we at now?
Yeah.
Before we decide where we want to be, where are we now? So we can't manage the problem until we've measured it. So that is a lot of work that we need to do. But I do see from the RAP and the UK version, or example of something similar, they are getting a lot of traction in their consumer and citizen behaviour education pieces. So it does work in terms of influencing consumer behaviour, but it's the water we swim in. Like, we don't want to come at this from a place of scarcity. It needs to have still that abundance model. Like, fashion and clothing should be something joyful that we all love. So you don't want to sort of be coming at it from a scarcity or making people fear or making them feel guilty.
Yes,
we really
the
need
guilt.
to be careful about.
I think the guilt's
guilt.
a big one. It's the guilt from kind of all angles, isn't it? It's, as you said, it should be joyful. Fashion has been very aspirational and inspirational in the past. So, look, I think
Yes.
conscious fashion, I really like that term, because it's not just about, the garment itself. It's about being conscious through every phase of business. And as you said, what can you do, whether it is, operating more lean so that you can get involved into a levy situation, or whether it is, as you said, focusing on circularity, closing the loop, recycling. There's so much that we can do as businesses. But I think it is removing the guilt and, taking the joy out of it, and for us to breathe a little bit more of optimism into where we are going as an industry. So, Danielle, how can brands get involved? We know about the founding members, we know about the voluntary scheme and levy.
Yes.
But for those who are tuning in, perhaps they're not at that stage yet, but how can they
Yeah.
express their interest and start to get involved and really engage with how the scheme is being rolled out and being built over time?
Yep. So for many brands, they're already engaged. Like it's been incredible how much interest we've had from brands along the way through the
Yep.
project. But I understand right now brands are keen to understand what Seamless is going to do. How do we sign up? So the last few months, we really have been laying the foundations right for good governance, bringing on the best CEO. But now we need to move forward to operationalizing the scheme. And that critically includes signing up members and get going with the job at hand. So we're only mere weeks away before we can provide that sort of advice and instruction to brands. But we do collect brands and any stakeholders' details to become part of a database. So we are building a database. We've got over 500, and we know that about 150 of those are brands that are like, right, when the time is right, send us the membership form. We're on, and so we are really encouraging brands to go and register their interest on the website, and maybe I can pop a link in the
Totally. Yeah, we'll be putting a link in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, so I'd encourage brands. Then you get like a monthly newsletter. That's what's been happening to the database, so that they can understand where they're at. And when it's time to, hit go on Seamless membership, that database will be the first point of call, and it'll become really clear what the next steps are.
So, Danielle, with the membership, so we've got the founding membership, we've got the scheme. Is there something in between that brands can expect in terms of getting involved?
I think that the foundation membership was kind of just for this first year of transition. So there's no, like, going forward, a membership will be a membership.
Yeah.
But we do really need to think about, whilst there's a huge amount of volume in those first 30 or whatever, the tail of our industry is very long. There's about 13,000 businesses or companies, brands in Australia. And that everyone counts. Like, Seamless is for everyone. So this isn't just about, oh, I'm a big enterprise. There'll be a problem or an issue that small brands, and I know this because I've spoken to them, where they sort of say, oh, well, we're very close to our market. We don't have a lot of excess, but we do have this problem. And we've been racking our brains trying to solve it. It's like, once you're in that Seamless membership, it's like a club effect. You've got like a group solving the same problem, because if it's your problem, it's someone else's problem, I can guarantee it. And so the intention of Seamless is that we can start to solve for those problems along the supply chain that all brands are having. So I'd like to think there's a value proposition in the Seamless continuum for every brand, including the 13,000 long tail, especially the 13,000 long tail. I really believe small acts can have a big impact.
Yeah, it's the power of the collective, isn't it?
Absolutely. And so, but we do need to think about, maybe the 4 cent isn't appropriate for micro or smaller brands. Maybe there's a flat fee. That's still a little bit of work that needs to be done. That might be a more appropriate form. And we know that that's how WRAP sort of works with their brands around that. So there's a bit of precedence in there as well that we can look at. But we really want to simplify for those small micro brands. We want them to have access to Seamless. Everyone should, but we also need to appreciate it might be just one person, or just flat out every day trying to wrap their head around everything. So we really appreciate that not everyone has a sustainability team.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's really important information to share, so that there isn't a barrier to getting involved and becoming a member.
Yes.
So yeah, really important. So we'll watch this space in terms of what's announced.
Yes.
Now, Danielle, there's a new CEO, so Ainsley Simpson. Yes. Can you tell us about Ainsley, and how is she going to be navigating the road ahead?
Well, as we speak, Ainsley starts next week, and honestly, I cannot wait just to have someone else on the team. But look, a better pair of hands you couldn't ask for. Like, Ainsley's coming into this role from having a strong track record in running a member-based not-for-profit organisation in the sustainability sector. And she's transformed that member-based organisation in that industry and grown it. So it's almost like, please, let's do that again. We are definitely in good hands. And I know that, to paraphrase Ainsley, she has already spoken about like keeping the end in mind. So it's always about clothing circularity by 2030. But this requires change at every level, starting with brands, but going through reuse and recycling operators and government, experts, industry and academia. But most importantly, anyone that wears clothes. So Ainsley, she's really coming at it from a holistic approach. Her first step and focus will be setting expectations with realistic targets and timelines. And she'll be doing that with the board, setting that near-term strategic plan. So what does the next 12 months look like and how does that put us on the path to 2030? And so, I really think that Ainsley, honestly.
No pressure, Ainsley. No pressure. But welcome to Seamless. And
look, Danielle can't chat whenever you want.
Danielle's not going to be taking that smile off her face for a while. Yeah, I'd love to chat once Ainsley's settled in, and maybe a couple of months down the track, we'll give her a chance to obviously, focus on the role at hand. We'd love to invite Ainsley onto the podcast. Now, Danielle, is there a final message that you'd like to share with our audience and industry about working together to embark on Seamless and the future of fashion?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose if I take a human kind of approach to this, and the people that I work with are so inspiring, and I always sort of, how do you keep people inspired without avoiding the burnout? This is a fairly, like some of the stuff that you have to wrap your head around and the stats that you're faced with, it can be, it can take its toll, and you have to be able to sort of turn that around and be inspired every day by the long-term purpose and the short losses, but there's a long game here that we're winning. So I think that, in terms of, embarking together, I feel like that I'm always looking for people to give me energy in that space around how do we kind of motivate each other and inspire each other to avoid that burnout. Because the last thing our industry needs is to lose good people, really good people that are committed to this change. And so I think that we owe it to each other to just, keep looking after each other as we go forward. So being kind and generous and patient and accepting that not everyone has great days every day, and where there's going to be a bit of rumble as we move through. But I think at the end of the day, if we all know that we're working towards that single purpose, that's kind of how I sort of feel about the next little while. I'm really looking forward to it. And thinking about transformation as I move into this, new stage of Seamless, it's all about industry transformation. That's not a program or a set end point. That is a continuous journey. And so we do need to really have that growth mindset the whole way along. So that's really what I'm focused on, like for the next little while, is those two things. And I'm hoping that if I get those right, then the rest is just detail.
It's a really inspiring and important message for our industry. Now, in closing, what excites you most about the future of fashion?
Look, I really had a good think about this because I get really excited about the future of the people in it and seeing the good work that people are doing. There's a lot of great people that are sort of, every day committed to changing the face of fashion. And that inspires me, I suppose. But I think also what is exciting in this Australian context, that we are positioned to do something really special when it comes to circular economy. This is a chance for our industry to actually say to the rest of Australia, this is what circular economy looks like. The plan and the action, like the scene is set for us to do something, to learn, but, to sort of teach as well, sort of really set the example. So I am excited about that. I think that when you talk to a lot of experts in clothing circularity, we're all at the start of understanding what this all means. So I actually think that, the potential is to create a new look industry for clothing and fashion and a new economy, which means new jobs and new skills. And, don't we all want that? So, that's I suppose, the thing that I'm most excited about. I also think that some of our academics and experts are the most brilliant brains in the world. Like, our innovation is off the charts. And we can prove this across so many other industries. So why not start with clothing and fashion too? So I think we've got all the ingredients to do something really special.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. You've got me excited. Danielle, thank you for joining me today. It is such crucial work that you're doing, Ainsley and the rest of the team. Best of
Thanks,
luck
Elizabeth.
with this next phase of Seamless. We're really excited to be able to share this with our audience. Let's keep educating. Let's keep getting it out there. We'll put all of the links in the show notes. And if anyone has any questions, please do reach out either to myself or to Danielle. More than happy to provide you with the information that you need to get involved. Thanks again, Danielle.
Thanks, Elizabeth. It was great to talk to you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Fashion Business Mindset podcast. We'd love to keep connected. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Fashion Equipped. Head to our website, fashionequipped.com.au. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share this podcast with others, hit subscribe, leave us a rating and review. Let's do this together. Let's make the fashion business your business.
This is a Guide Your Light network production, creating podcasts with purpose.